show you guys how to do these really crazy long build up and rising parts, and it's all done in Anna, so we're just going to be using Anna, but you can of course do this in any other synth. Well, not any other, but synth similar to this. And so let's let this build up in and we'll get the video started. So let's listen to this. Alright, so the reason why it's kind of a different process to do these longer build-ups is because most synths, you know, when you make risers, you usually just take the pitch, assign it to a envelope or sometimes a LFO with a slow rate, and you just let that go and rise and build up the pitch and all that, and that's how you get risers. But with most synths, they reset their envelopes and LFOs after 8 bars, so sometimes if you want to do a 16 bar buildup, you know, halfway through it's just gonna stop climbing and it's just gonna drop down, reset, and start the pitch climb like all over. So what you have to do in those cases is just get the buildup effect outside of the synth, so you just don't use the envelopes or LFOs for the pitch modulation, you just use the pitch bend. So that's how we get these really crazy long build-ups and risers and all that. So now that I've kind of gone that out of the way, so in the first like 30 seconds of talking, basically we already figured out how to do that. So let me just now kind of show you some of the things I like to do with these build-up parts. So I always like to have a few things. I like to have a big jet swell type sounding layer, so something that starts off really low and then kind of starts to sound like a jet later on. So that would be this top layer, and we'll get to that in a sec. Then I usually like to have some kind of like sequenced or LFO or hovering type sound, so I have something like that here. And then I like to have something kind of like a typical riser, and then I'll just duplicate that and bring up the MIDI up 2 octaves, so then I'll have 2 instances of the same riser but at 2 different octaves, and that usually plays nicely. And then lastly, I like to have something that follows this exact same MIDI as a snare roll, but it has a laser kind of quality to it. So when we put all that stuff together, you get something pretty interesting. So that's at least what I do when I'm building samples for the sample pack. So I'm working on an essential build pack here, and right now I'm currently working on the risers, and so I'm doing the 8 bar and 16 bar tuned risers. So actually, if we take out the E1 16 bar riser and unwarp it, because it always warps and I hate that it does it, and I even tell you on the sample, no warp on. So this is a 24 bar buildup, by the way, so the one that you heard at the beginning, and this is the 16 bar version of that with, you know, the 2 bars of tail. So this is actually a shorter version of everything that's going on up here, but let's just listen to this, and we'll skip ahead through it so you can kind of get a feel of all those different elements I just mentioned. So look out for like a jet-like sounding thing, and then, you know, some sort of laser-ish kind of like whooping. So it sounds like this. And then the jet one sounds like this. So when you put all these different elements together, and so you get the idea. So let's go through these now. So I guess the first place I'll start off is that laser whoopy sort of thing. So you know, typically I like to have, you know, snare rolls and things like that. So I'll just take that MIDI from that and I'll just copy it over to a synth like the Anna, and then I'll kind of design this layer sort of like a laser. So with lasers, all you have to do is really get an LFO and just take the pitch and apply a rate to it. So if I slow this rate down, it starts to sound like a laser. So again, that's just the pitch and all that stuff going on. So if I start to bring this up, it's to as fast as it can go. The rate just goes nuts and it sounds really dirty and gritty. So in that way, it's similar to making a laser, but it's not really an end laser sound. So I like to have that. So this is called the noise saw, and I'm gonna give you guys all the presets I show you in the video. and a few more extras. So it'll be this folder and this folder. And so that's why I'm not going to really go over everything. You can see it when you're there. Let's go to the next group where right here on the group I have this rack here. So it's just a filter and a amp. So the amp is really there just to bring in a lot of brightness and that kind of thing. So it's really good to have this brightness introduced into a build-up because we just really needed to bring in that excitement. So right here it's just the default setting. So once you pull out the amp from the audio effects, so right there, it's just the blue setting, and all I'm doing is automating the dry wet up as well as the rate. So as you can see right here on the group, it just builds up over time. On the filter here, I'm just kind of a little bit of the high stuff so it's not too bright, and with the LFO on it, it becomes a very interesting thing when you bring in that rate higher and higher and higher, so it kind of adds even more excitement, but just killing in that extra brightness. Like, I do want the brightness from the amp, but obviously, as you can see, it's not really high up, so just kind of use it in that kind of fashion and you should be okay. And so I mentioned that I like to have a hovering or a LFO or sequence type sounding thing, so this is that layer. Now it sounds kind of boring like that, but once it starts rising up, you know, after the pitch bend and all that stuff, it really starts to get pretty exciting. So next is probably a very generic sort of riser, so anything that is a riser would probably work in this case, so something like that. And I'm not even using pitch bend on this one because the cool thing about the Anna is if you turn off the sinks on the LFOs and set the rate down all the way down, it will take such a long time for it to fully rise, and it won't reset for the longest time ever. So you can definitely play this for like 24 bars and you won't get that weird reset thing. So if you just trust me, if you try it with any other synth, you'll notice like 8 or 16 bars in that at some point it will just stop climbing and just drop back down, and you really don't want that. So this preset is called Riser Long Acid, and I duplicated that one down here and played the MIDI 2 octaves higher. So this is being played at E1 and this one's being played at E3. So when you put those two together, it's kind of like that big, that typical buzzy build-up sort of thing. So combine that with the hovering sort of thing, and then laser sort of thing. That's basically all you need. And so I do have one more layer on top of this, and this is kind of like a low layer that kind of starts to come in towards the end, sounding like a jet sort of thing. So this is it right here. So, you know, towards the end, it really starts to sound like that kind of jet-like sound. So if we listen to the audio right here, so it's maybe it's hard for you over YouTube for you to hear all the individual stuff like I hear it, but yeah. So I've kind of shown you everything. So the only other thing I would recommend with build-ups is to play around with your velocity as well for your snare rolls and your laser-ish type of build-ups. So like in this one right here, if you notice the velocities here, they come in gradually. So it's not like where by default every note is, you know, the exact same velocity of something like that, you know. Or if I could draw a straight line, you know, something like that. So with every MIDI note being the same velocity, it's just really boring. So if you kind of take the time to do this kind of thing, it starts to sound more like a crescendo and starts to sound more natural. And I also do the exact same thing with snare rolls. So if we look over here, you'll see the exact same thing. And I can even show you probably a lot easier with this. So let's just take a little part of a snare roll here, and let's just set it to what probably would it look like by default, something like that. Super boring. So let's draw in a sort of slope sort of thing. I'm probably too zoomed out to get really precise with this, so select all and then just So, over a short little period of time, it doesn't sound that interesting. But when you really apply it to a really long period of time, or like 8 bars, 16 bars, 24 bars, 32 bars, it starts to sound really cool. So I do that with all those kind of... I do that in all the places I can where I have a lot of notes like that, and they're just playing a steady pattern, so that way it just comes in more naturally. So you can find everything I showed you, all the presets, on my Facebook page. It should be towards the bottom of the list, so that way you can find it easily. And of course, lathes.